practice is a bait and switch. Ashtanga yoga is a massive bait and switch. It always has been. I'm watching the bait and switch every day from backstage here in the teacher's mind, and I wanted to make sure that from time to time I'm explicit about what the training is really designed to do and how the bait and switch works to sort of refine the ego, hopefully, over time. So you know that the center of gravity of this practice is the nervous system. The bait and switch I'm talking about is on the level of the training of the nervous system. But there's something here that I'm taking for granted about the thinking mind, the motivational structures that we approach anything with. And if you are a year or so into practice and you don't know this cold, stop, get out a notebook before you do anything else. Make sure you know the beginning of book 2 of the Yoga Sutras. This is really good technology for actually understanding the nature of the thinking mind, and whatever else you want to make of the deep philosophical wellspring of this practice. Knowing the nuts and bolts of the first 2 books of the Yoga Sutras it'll just help you understand the context of what's happening here. So in the second book, 3rd chapter, there's one of many laundry lists of the kinds of motivation that lead us astray. And the way that they lead us astray, you'll see this more in the first book, a little in the second as well, is by creating just chaos in the mind. The fluctuations of the mind come from these 5 sorts of motives or deep sort of knots in the deep mind. And they are delusion, wrong identity, for example, identification with certain postures. What will I be if I don't do Marichasana D, for example, right? So avidya, asmita, raga and devesha are attraction and aversion, and abhinivesha is fear. And the ways that these conditionings just kind of lead us around by our nose and keep us from actually like finding happiness and balance in our system are just the easy quick draw of that list to be like, oh, am I in a place of avidya, asmita, raga, devesha, abhinivesha is one of the tools that we can all use to work with a thinking mind. This bit, though, on the bait and switch, works from the motivations, the sort of thinking mind and deep mind motivations that we all bring to the practice, and gradually, sometimes without our even recognizing what's going on, kind of transform us from the inside on the level of the nervous system. What I'm about to say is going to be really intuitive for some of you. I've seen a lot of people just get lucky and understand this from the very beginning. They really do, like, check the ego at the door and engage the practice in the way I'm about to describe. For others of us, it takes longer, and the nervous system actually has to get the message as long as we're placing the mind in check. And I would say I'm definitely in the latter category. Thinking back the last few days, it seems like I really started to get the hint after 5 years of very intense practice, very devoted practice, really started to find that my nervous system itself was transforming. But that, I hope for you to not have to waste time to all be quicker studies than I was. So here's the deal. There's a sensory motor system that is at the center of this practice. My way of languaging this is different from my teachers, but I think it'll be clarifying for some of you to put this out here. So the sensory motor system, this sort of bedrock of what we're doing here in the pranamaya kosha with the practice, it does do things, right? The motor system executes things, it achieves things, it makes shapes, it gains skill, and creates strength and flexibility. It, gets us through the acquisition of skills. And so we give the motor system stuff to do and place the mind in check with these really wonderful philosophical anchors. And then wait for the center of gravity to transform from a motor to a sensory primacy. And again, some people just walk in the door with that. But for some of us, we have to wait for there to be kind of a slow gestalt shift, for the motor activity to kind of fall to the background. It's like that which is taken for granted. And the sensory aspects of the nervous system to come to light. And when this is happening, this is part of the reason that the shala is constructed to be such a sensorially safe environment, so there's not a lot of light or sound or smell that will affect your nervous system, because as you're shifting into this highly sensorially rich awareness of the inner world, the outer world also really comes to life, and you do have access to more information, but just more awareness in the inner and the outer nervous system. And the question then becomes is like, what's the use? What's the use of being super sensitive inside and outside? Well, that's the training. It's to help us be more super aware of the energy world that we're always inhabiting. And so the bias in the Western culture towards doing, right, it's actually a really good vehicle to harness. And the practice was designed to harness it, not just for the Western mind, but also for young people's minds. 100 years ago, the insight was that you can kind of catch the driven nervous system, channelize it, and then, in my words, sort of allow it, once there's a motor sort of program that a person can settle the mind around, then through that awareness of the minds and the motivation, and also just feeling over time, allow the sensory system to really come to the fore. So there's still a lot of activity in the motor system, of course, right? But what happens in the long run with this shift that many of us have to go through on the mat is, again, this deep training about the motivations that lead to fluctuations of the mind, that lead us really astray and into states of disorganization and chaos. So coming back to these tools from the highly secular, non-sectarian religious in any way, yet just the science of the Yoga Sutras, is this notion that the motivations that come from these default, they're called the kleshas, the modifications of the mind that lead us to suffering and confusion, can be sort of seen and clarified through this practice of sensory awareness movement that creates sensory awareness, making us less likely to fall into states of delusion, wrong identity, extreme attraction, extreme aversion, or fear. So yeah, this is just kind of where I live in the bait and switch. I think a lot of you are right there too, but some of us, some of the time, myself included, kind of lose the plot and think it's about postures, or think it's about I don't know, being awesome at physical skills. And that happens, all of you, right? This is an extraordinary skill set that you're cultivating. But the real nervous system key is the heightened sensory awareness and the way that it changes your world to really live in the energy realms with a lot of awareness and a lot of sensitivity.